Philip IV of Spain married a 14-year-old when he was in his 40s, but that's not even the most disturbing part of their union. Every family has a few skeletons in their closet, but Philip IV's legendary kin had a graveyard's worth. Though the king of the planet outwardly appeared to be the perfect ruler, he couldn't outrun his demons and his disaster of a personal life. They not only destroyed his family, but also his nation and empire. Philip IV's ancestors, the Habsburgs, were a legendary family who ruled Spain for 2 centuries. But they're notorious today for a darker reason. You see, the Habsburgs were so power-hungry, they made sure all their influence and wealth stayed within the family by marrying each other. They paid the price for inbreeding with health issues and a cursed appearance, particularly the protruding Habsburg jaw. This dynasty's insatiable lust for power and each other resulted in a tragic consequence for not only Philip IV, but Spain herself. On April 8, 1605, Philip IV came into the world as the son of Philip III and Margaret of Austria. Philip IV's parents, particularly Margaret, were also super religious, but his dad's devoutness became even more extreme after tragedy struck the royal family. Money can't buy happiness, and our poor little rich boy learned this at only 6 years old. The physically weak and inbred Margaret didn't survive giving birth to Alfonso, her 8th child. To cope, Philip III, also weak and inbred, fell into a rabbit hole of fanatic mysticism. Consequently, Philip IV grew up in a gilded prison of friars, endless lessons, and no freedom. Schemers with ulterior motives saw the opportunity and bounced. Gaspar de Guzman, the Count Duke of Olivares, was many things, but he wasn't one to squander an opportunity. Philip IV was only 10 when he met Olivares. Within a year, the 28-year-old gained the princess' trust. Over time, he isolated Philip IV and secured his influence. This would have a devastating impact on Philip IV's life and rule. It didn't take long for Olivares to start using Philip IV to further his political schemes. You know, Philip IV became a child groom largely thanks to Olivares' influence. At only 10 years old, he married 13-year-old Elizabeth of France. Despite being born with silver spoons and gilded crowns, it's obvious both children were just political pawns. To make matters worse, the miserable details of their wedding make it clear that this was anything but a love story. Philip IV and Elizabeth's love was blind. Literally, not only did the scheming adults force the children to marry way too young, they didn't meet until after the proxy wedding. Once the kids finally met each other, their marriage didn't get much better. It got even worse after Philip IV unexpectedly took the throne. His new bride found out the hard way that he wasn't ready for marriage or leadership. March 31, 1621, Philip III passed at only 42 years old. In an instant, Philip IV's life would never be the same. He was now the King of Spain and 16 years old. As crowds flooded the palace and Olivares pushed him to work immediately, Philip IV didn't have any time to grieve alone. Poor kid had to publicly mourn and break down in front of everyone. This only strengthened Olivares' hold on the prince-turned-king. After years of biding his time, it was finally Olivares' time to shine. Philip IV may have been Spain's official king, but Olivares was the one holding his strings. Philip IV relied on Olivares for everything, from making everyday decisions to national policy, but Olivares wasn't content with this massive influence he already had over Philip IV. He wanted to ensure that he was the only voice who mattered. Let the manipulation begin. The puppet master stoked the flames of paranoia within his puppet. Olivares manipulated Philip IV into distrusting everyone, except for Olivares-approved minions, of course. This even included the king's own family, especially his brothers. Olivares even saw an enemy in Elizabeth, who was more strong-willed than her husband. Fearing the queen's influence, he pushed Philip IV onto the path of sin and betrayal to destroy their marriage. Okay, Philip IV wasn't naturally the most loyal husband, but Olivares made it so much worse. The advisor created and maintained a national network just for mistress scouting. Whenever a promising actress appeared on the theater scene, one of Olivares' agents sent her off to meet the king. Understandably, Elizabeth wasn't pleased, but she'd have to wait for the perfect time to strike. And if it made her feel any better, Philip IV treated his mistresses even worse. In other countries, clever mistresses could seize political and social power for themselves, but Spain wasn't like any other country. Philip IV's mistresses were nothing more than disposable toys. It didn't take long for the king to become bored with his concubines and mindlessly toss them aside. Sadly, these mistresses suffered a horrible fate afterward. After he decided to end the relationship, the woman had to move to a convent for the rest of her days. Of course, there were many who didn't want to give up their lives for a brief affair, but Philip IV didn't get it, and he took his advances too far. During a pursuit, one woman had to lock herself in a room and desperately tell him, "No, no, sire, I don't want to be a nun." Philip IV may have been once a prince, but he was no Prince Charming, and poor Elizabeth knew that most of all. Is ignorance bliss? Elizabeth wouldn't know. Their marriage, broken by infidelity and daughters who passed in infancy, was even weaker than his inbred genes. Who could blame a girl for allegedly taking a page out of Philip IV's book and straying outside of the marriage too? All this jealousy, ego, and possessiveness came to a fiery head during his not-so-sweet 17th birthday. Madrid during the spring of 1622 was euphoric thanks to the endless events celebrating Philip IV's 17th birthday. The Count de Villamediana hosted one of them, a theater performance dedicated to the king at his villa. Philip IV sat in the front row with his siblings while Elizabeth sat behind the stage. Nothing seemed amiss until a curtain caught on fire. In mere moments, flames engulfed the entire venue. As theatergoers fled, the king made a chilling realization: his queen was nowhere to be found. Philip IV assumed the worst when his frantic search failed. Eventually, in the dense gardens surrounding the theater, or what was the theater, he found Elizabeth. She'd fainted, but was otherwise alive and well. However, Philip IV found another problem. The Count de Villamediana was holding her near unconscious body in his arms. Flames weren't the only thing to erupt that night. Scandal, whisper, and gossip followed. His 17th birthday turned sour thanks to the conspiracies. Gossipers speculated the Count orchestrated the fire, but not to end the king's life. Rather, he wanted credit for saving the queen's life. After all, there's nothing more romantic and grand than the hero holding the heroine after rescuing her. It's unclear whether these rumors are true, but they undoubtedly reached the ears of the king, and let's just say Philip IV didn't react well. 4 months after the fire, a crossbowman ambushed the Count and ended him. The Count was popular in Spain's high society, so his clearly premeditated demise instigated another scandal. Everyone believed the crossbowman was Alonso Mateo, one of Philip IV's men. The king had the motive and means to carry the ambush out. However, while everyone believed Philip IV was responsible, he got away scot-free. For now, at least, the king was untouchable and his reputation reflected it. Philip IV enjoyed a gleaming reputation despite his many mistresses, luxuries, and scandals. While he stirred up trouble constantly, the king was shockingly unemotional in public, to the point that many compared him to a statue. A sculptor rumored to have publicly laughed on just 3 occasions. These were actually huge compliments and wins for his image. The Spanish loved stoicism in kings. But Philip IV couldn't have been more different in private. Behind closed doors, he was lively, witty, and obsessed with art. He was even one of the country's greatest art patrons. But Philip IV also had a darker side. He wasn't just lazy and incompetent, he was addicted to pleasure. Oliverus basically served mistresses to Philip IV on platters, and he couldn't resist. But the king wasn't the one who paid the price for his fatal flaw. There are some things money can't buy. Philip IV and Elizabeth struggled to produce one son, much less an heir and a spare. Their first 4 children, all daughters, didn't survive infancy. In contrast, Philip IV fathered at least 30 illegitimate children with his countless mistresses. Philip IV had too many mistresses to name, but there was only one, Maria Inés Calderón. In 1627, one of Oliver's agents arranged a performance starring the teenage actress for the king. It was lust at first sight. Shortly afterward, Maria became Philip IV's favorite mistress, but all his extravagant gifts paled in comparison to the most brazen way the king showed his favoritism. On April 17, 1629, Maria gave birth to their son, John Joseph. This baby would have ended up just like Philip IV's dozens of other unacknowledged illegitimate children, but this time he intervened. The king gave John the title Serene Highness and the upbringing of a prince, but not everything went according to plan. Philip IV, overjoyed with the son he'd always wanted, soon received a stunning demand from his beloved mistress. Shortly after Maria gave birth, she threw herself at Philip IV's feet and began sobbing. She prayed and begged for his permission to end their affair. The new mom believed she'd fulfilled her life's purpose by giving birth to Europe's greatest monarch's son. Now she wanted nothing more than to devote herself to religion, without him. Heartbroken and desperate, Philip IV tried to change her mind, but Maria refused to budge. Finally, he gave in. This is the story of how a celebrated actress turned royal mistress willingly left her glamorous life for a remote convent. He and Elizabeth clashed over his illegitimate son, especially after she gave birth to Balthasar Charles a few months later. Unlike John, Balthasar was legitimate and the future king of Spain. Philip IV and Elizabeth had 3 more kids, 2 daughters and a son. Out of the 3, only their youngest daughter survived into adulthood. However, despite Philip IV's philandering, he was actually a decent dad by 17th century standards. Yes, the bar is on the floor, but we'll take it. Meanwhile, Elizabeth didn't keep herself busy with only motherhood. After scheming with Spanish nobles and delivering a passionate speech to her husband, Elizabeth finally ousted Olivarez in 1643. After decades of humiliation, the queen finally retaliated, and she did it so well. Turns out revenge is a dish best served years later. Afterwards, she gained a lot of influence over Philip IV, but it wouldn't last. Philip IV was not having a great time 5 months after firing Olivarez. Turns out the insecure and indecisive king couldn't do this solo. He ended up assigning a lot of responsibility to Don Luis de Haro, Olivarez's nephew. But still, Philip IV continued to struggle. Specifically, he couldn't help but continue pursuing pleasure. As he drowned in self-loathing, an unexpected lifeline saved him. On July 10, 1643, Philip IV happened upon a convent during his travels. There, he met Sister Maria de Agreda, and his life would never be the same. The unexpected pair hit it off immediately. The struggling king latched onto her wisdom. Maria was a nun, mystic, and religious writer. Now, she found herself the unexpected confidant of Spain's ruler. Their relationship wasn't just unexpected, it was unprecedented. He depended on her for guidance and support like no other. Good thing too, because soon he would desperately need it. Between August and September 1644, Philip IV was flying high off important victories on the battlefield. But what goes up must come down. That's when he received news of Elizabeth's deteriorating health. After she fell seriously ill, well-meaning doctors drained the queen of all her blood. In a last-ditch effort, they even dug up the decayed bodies of saints to bring to the palace. They were out of options and time. Now Philip IV wasn't just battling Europe, he was racing the clock to get home before it was too late. Tragically, he wasn't with Elizabeth when she succumbed to her ailments that same year. She was only 41. Despite his affairs, Philip IV still cared for Elizabeth in his own way. But how much more loss can a person take? Philip IV may have been a king, but he was still just a man. At this point, he'd already lost a mother, father, brother, multiple babies, and wife. This, along with stresses concerning Spain's finances and military, broke him down. Only Maria knew the extent of his misery, and the most devastating blow hadn't even landed yet. On October 9, 1646, Philip IV's son and heir Balthasar Charles lost his battle with smallpox. The 16-year-old left behind a devastated family, country, and fiancé. Who would be the next king now? Despite his grief, Philip IV knew what had to be done. The 44-year-old king decided to marry Mariana of Austria. She was 14 years old, but that wasn't the scandalous part. She had also been Balthasar's fiancé. But Philip IV and Mariana had known each other for years. Well, because she was his sister's kid. That's right, she was his niece, but more importantly to Philip IV, she was the daughter of Emperor Ferdinand III. Sister Maria normally received frequent letters from Philip IV, but her mailbox remained empty during his honeymoon. Turns out the king was too busy to write. When he finally wrote, Philip IV raved about his niece/wife, but Maria knew him too well. She emphasized the importance of remaining faithful and quickly producing an heir. Turns out viewing and treating women like disposable toys is a hard habit to break. Philip IV soon lost interest in Mariana, especially because they struggled to conceive. He'd married her for an heir, but he had no luck. After their honeymoon high wore off, the king had to face the truth. He didn't have anything in common with his teenage niece except genetics. Mariana realized there was nothing she could do to ensure Philip IV's loyalty. Her uncle/husband was a cheater and cold as ice, always was, always would be. To cope, the vivacious girl transformed into a frigid queen. History was repeating itself and not in a good way. Mariana gave birth to girl after girl, only for each one to perish in their infancy. Mariana and Philip IV married to produce more heirs, or at the very least one, but their inbred genes couldn't even do that. Then the universe threw them a bone. On November 6, 1661, Philip IV celebrated with his nation after Mariana gave birth to Charles II, their long-awaited son and heir. While Spain's influence was slowly declining, an heir guaranteed the stability of the Habsburg line and rule. Or so he thought. It didn't take long for everyone to notice something wasn't quite right with their future king. Poor Charles II paid the price for his family's inbreeding. Measles, chickenpox, rubella, and smallpox, you name it, and the poor kid probably had it at some point. Charles II may have been the heir, but no one knew if he would even make it to his coronation. While the universe took away so many family members, it cursed Philip IV with the burden of life. It didn't help that his country was also struggling. As tragedies piled up, Philip IV realized he was the common denominator. He truly believed the state of his family and country was God's retribution for his personal flaws. The king confessed this theory to his confidant, until the universe took her away too. Any remaining light in his life vanished when Sister Maria passed. Now there was no one left he could confide in. The aging king looked around his court and saw nothing but schemers, anticipating his demise. He looked at his country and he saw nothing but a superpower decaying. One day, Mariana realized servants hadn't brought sweetmeats to her table for days and demanded to know why. Turns out the palace's supplier cut them off because he hadn't been paid. This wasn't just an oversight. Thanks to endless conflicts and poor policy, Philip IV was short on cash. You know a country is seriously broke and struggling when poverty reaches the king and queen. In 1665, whatever hope Philip IV still nurtured vanished after the British and Portuguese reduced the Spanish army to almost nothing. In an instant, Philip IV shattered his image of the perfect stoic Spanish king. He stunned his men by breaking down in front of them. Everyone has a breaking point, and Philip IV finally reached his. The aging and weakened king never truly recovered after that day. Once again, Madrid's rumor mill was turning, just as Philip IV's health took a turn for the worse. Now the aging king felt defeated mentally and physically, but that's not exciting. So gossipers speculated the king suffered from a curse that officials were frantically trying to undo. In reality, Philip IV's condition had to do more with sickness than spells. Thanks to a litany of ailments, he spent his final chapter in constant and excruciating pain. Philip IV found no comfort in Mariana. Quite the opposite, actually. Turns out his own wife was one of the schemers already planning for his passing. Philip IV spent his final days surrounded by people, but he might as well have been alone. On September 17, 1665, he quietly passed, an anticlimactic end to a cursed but captivating life. By the end of his 23-year reign, the Spanish Empire was massive, like 12.2 million square kilometers massive. It's why Philip IV earned the nickname the Planet King. If we're judging his rule by size alone, he was very successful, but behind this massive empire, things weren't as they appeared. During Philip IV's reign, Spain struggled with military, social, and economic problems. Charles II struggled to produce a viable heir with 2 wives. Now, doesn't this sound familiar? Mariana and his doctors decided to do something drastic and deranged in hopes of increasing the chances of an heir. They dug up Philip IV's decaying body. Charles II allegedly actually slept with his dad's body in his bed for a time, hoping it would do something. Some things are better left buried. Thanks for watching History Expose. If you love uncovering the best stories in history, hit like and subscribe to keep exploring with us. Don't forget to visit our main page, Factinate, for more incredible facts about everything.